Among the many teachings of Jesus recorded in the Gospels, there are parables that appear multiple times, told to different audiences in different places. The parable of the sower, the lost sheep, and the prodigal son were each shared on various occasions, their truths resonating across the hills of Galilee and the streets of Jerusalem. Yet there exists one parable, spoken only once, that carries within it a profound truth about the nature of God's kingdom and the transformation that faith brings to the human heart. This parable was told on a warm afternoon in a small village near the Sea of Galilee. Jesus had been teaching throughout the day, and as the sun began its descent toward the western hills, a smaller group of followers gathered around him beneath the shade of an ancient olive tree. Among them were fishermen, merchants, tax collectors, and women who supported his ministry. They had all heard many of his teachings, but on this particular day, Jesus shared a story he would never tell again. The setting. The day had been long and fruitful. Jesus had healed several people who had come seeking his touch, and he had engaged in deep discussions about the nature of God's love with teachers of the law who genuinely sought understanding. Now, as the crowds dispersed to return to their homes for the evening meal, an intimate gathering remained. Peter sat closest to Jesus, as was his custom, with John and James nearby. Mary Magdalene was there, along with Martha and several other women who had been faithful followers. Matthew the tax collector had brought his writing materials, though he sat quietly, simply listening. The atmosphere was peaceful, filled with the gentle sounds of evening birds and the distant bleating of sheep returning to their folds. One of the followers, a young man named Simon who was not the same as Simon Peter, asked Jesus a question that would prompt this unique parable. "Master," he said, "we have heard you teach about the kingdom of heaven many times. We understand it is like a mustard seed, like a treasure hidden in a field, like a pearl of great price. But tell us, what happens to a person's heart when the kingdom truly takes root within them? How does the change occur?" Jesus smiled, for it was a thoughtful question from a sincere heart. He looked around at the faces gathered before him, each one representing a different journey, a different story of transformation. Then he began to speak. The parable of the two gardens. "Listen carefully," Jesus said, "for I will tell you a parable about the kingdom of heaven and how it transforms those who receive it. There was a man who owned a piece of land on the hillside. This land had been in his family for generations, but it had become neglected and overgrown. Wild thorns covered much of it, and the soil had become hard and depleted from years of drought and poor care. When this man looked at his land, he saw only what it was, barren, difficult, and seemingly without value. One day, a traveler passed through the region. This traveler was known throughout the land as a master gardener, someone who could make even the most desolate places bloom with life. When the traveler saw the man's land, he did not see what it was, but rather what it could become. The traveler approached the man and said, "I see great potential in your land. If you will allow me to work with you, I will teach you how to transform it into a garden more beautiful than you can imagine. But you must be willing to participate in the work, and you must trust the process, even when it seems difficult." The man, curious but uncertain, agreed. The traveler then said, "We will divide your land into two gardens. In the first garden, I will show you what can be accomplished through your own effort and understanding. In the second garden, I will show you what can be accomplished when you work with me, following my guidance completely." They began with the first garden. The traveler taught the man techniques for clearing the land, for enriching the soil, and for planting seeds. The man worked diligently, following the instructions as best he understood them. He removed many of the thorns, though some deep roots remained that he could not extract. He tilled the soil and added what nutrients he could find. He planted seeds and watered them faithfully. After many weeks of labor, the first garden began to show signs of life. Some plants grew, though they were modest in size and limited in variety. The man felt proud of his accomplishment, for the garden was certainly better than the barren land had been. It produced enough to sustain him, and occasionally there was beauty to be found among the rows. But then they turned their attention to the second garden. "In this garden," the traveler said, "you will still work, but you will work differently. I will go before you and show you exactly where to dig and how deep. I will provide the nutrients for the soil from my own storehouse. I will give you seeds you have never seen before, and I will tell you precisely when and where to plant them. When you do not understand why something must be done in a certain way, trust me and do it anyway. When the work seems too difficult, I will strengthen your hands. When you grow weary, I will remind you of the vision of what this garden will become." The man agreed, though he did not fully understand how this garden would differ from the first. The work began, and immediately he noticed the difference. The traveler led him to the deepest thorn bushes first, the ones he had avoided in the first garden because they seemed too difficult to remove. But with the traveler's guidance and help, even these were extracted, roots and all. The soil preparation was more thorough than anything the man had attempted before. The traveler brought rich compost, minerals from distant mountains, and water from a pure spring. He showed the man how to work the soil to a depth he had never imagined necessary. Then came the planting. The seeds the traveler provided were unlike any the man had seen in the marketplace. These are seeds of plants that will not only provide food, the traveler explained, but will also beautify the land, enrich the soil further for future seasons, and attract beneficial creatures that will help the garden thrive. Some will grow quickly to encourage you. Others will take years to mature, but their fruit will be worth the wait. The man planted according to the traveler's exact instructions, even when the pattern seemed unusual to him. He placed certain plants together that he would never have combined, and he left spaces that seemed wasteful. But he trusted the traveler's wisdom. As the weeks passed, the second garden began to transform in ways that astonished the man. Plants grew with vigor he had never witnessed. Flowers of extraordinary colors bloomed in perfect harmony. Fruit trees that normally took many years to produce bore fruit in their first season. The garden began to attract beautiful birds, helpful insects, and even travelers who had heard of its magnificence came to see it and rest in its shade. But the most remarkable thing was not just what grew in the second garden, but what grew in the man himself. As he worked in the second garden under the traveler's guidance, he found that his own character was changing. The patience required to follow instructions he did not immediately understand taught him humility. The trust he placed in the traveler's wisdom when results were not yet visible strengthened his faith. The joy he experienced when the garden exceeded his expectations opened his heart to gratitude he had never known. The man discovered that working in the second garden changed how he saw everything. When he returned to look at the first garden, he no longer felt pride in it, but rather recognized its limitations. He saw where his own understanding had been insufficient, where his strength had failed, where his vision had been too small. One day, the man said to the traveler, "I understand now. The first garden shows what I can do on my own. It is better than barrenness, but it is limited by my own strength and understanding. The second garden shows what can be accomplished when I surrender my will to yours, when I trust your wisdom over my own, when I allow you to work through me rather than simply for me." The traveler smiled and said, "You have learned the truth. But there is more. Look closely at yourself. Do you not see that you, too, have become like the second garden? When we began, your heart was like the barren land, not without value, but hardened by difficulty and choked by thorns of bitterness, worry, and self-reliance. But as you have worked with me, as you have trusted me, as you have allowed me to cultivate your heart just as we have cultivated this land, you have been transformed. The fruit growing in this garden is beautiful, but the fruit growing in your character is eternal." The response. When Jesus finished speaking, a profound silence fell over the group. Each person sat contemplating the layers of meaning in the parable. Finally, Mary Magdalene spoke softly, "Lord, are we the land in this parable?" Jesus nodded. "Each of you is both the land and the gardener. You must recognize that while you can accomplish something on your own, the true transformation of your heart and life comes when you work together with the Father. He is the master gardener who sees not what you are, but what you can become through his grace." Peter, always quick to respond, asked, "But Master, the first garden still produced something. Are you saying our own efforts are worthless?" "Not worthless, Peter," Jesus replied gently. "The first garden represents what you can accomplish through your own understanding of righteousness and goodness. It is better than leaving the land barren. But the kingdom of heaven is not merely about being slightly better than you were. It is about transformation so complete that you become a new creation, capable of producing fruit you never imagined possible." Matthew, who had been listening intently, observed, "The man had to choose to work with the traveler. The traveler offered, but the man had to accept and participate." "Yes," Jesus affirmed, "this is the nature of the kingdom. The Father invites all people to this partnership, but each must choose to accept. And accepting means more than simply acknowledging the invitation. It means actively participating in the transformation process, even when you do not understand every step, even when the work seems difficult." Young Simon, who had asked the original question, spoke again. "So the change in our hearts happens as we work with God, not just as we work for God?" Jesus looked at him with warmth. "You have understood well. Many people try to serve God through their own strength and understanding, like the first garden. They follow rules, they perform religious duties, they try to be good people. And these efforts produce something. just as the first garden produced crops. But the kingdom of heaven is about something far greater. It is about allowing God to work in you, through you, and with you to create something that reflects His glory rather than merely your own effort. The deeper meaning. As the evening grew darker and stars began to appear in the sky above them, Jesus continued to teach about the parable. He explained that the thorns in the land represented the things that choke out spiritual life, the worries of this world, the deceitfulness of wealth, the desire for things that do not truly satisfy. In the first garden, he said, the man removed the thorns he could easily see and reach. But the deep roots remained. This is what happens when people try to change themselves through willpower alone. They may modify their behavior and remove obvious sins from their lives, but the roots of pride, selfishness, and fear remain buried in their hearts. In the second garden, the traveler helped the man remove even the deepest roots. This is what happens when you allow God's Spirit to work deeply in your heart. He reveals things hidden even from your own awareness. He gives you the strength to face and remove things you could never extract on your own. One of the women asked, Lord, what about the different seeds in the second garden? What do they represent? Jesus explained, when you work with God in the transformation of your heart, He plants things in you that you would never think to cultivate yourself. He develops in you patience, kindness, peace, and love that go beyond natural human capacity. He creates in you a desire for things that please Him. He gives you gifts and abilities you did not know you possessed. And all of these work together in a pattern that may seem strange to you at first, but which produces harmony and beauty beyond measure. James asked, why did you say the traveler would never tell this parable again? Is it because we needed to hear it at this particular time? Jesus looked around at the faces glowing in the twilight. This parable is for you, here, now, because you have asked with sincere hearts how transformation occurs. Each of you is at a point in your journey where you must choose whether you will continue trying to cultivate your own garden with your own wisdom, or whether you will fully surrender to the Father's guidance and work with Him in creating something beautiful from your life. The truth in this parable will spread through you as you live it, not as you simply repeat it. Others will see the difference between the two gardens in your own lives. They will see what you accomplished on your own, and they will see what God accomplishes through you when you work together with Him. This testimony will be more powerful than any repetition of words. The practical application. Peter, always practical, asked, how do we do this, Lord? How do we work with God in this way? Jesus answered, you must start each day acknowledging that you are the land, and God is the master gardener. You must invite Him to show you what needs to be removed from your heart, and you must be willing to face even the painful extraction of deep roots. You must ask Him what He wants to plant in you, rather than simply deciding on your own what kind of person you will be. When you pray, do not merely present God with your plans and ask Him to bless them. Instead, ask Him to reveal His plans and give you the strength to participate in them. When you read the scriptures, do not only look for rules to follow, but seek to understand the character of the Father and how He works in human hearts. When you face difficulties, do not rely solely on your own wisdom to solve them. Invite God into the situation and watch for His guidance. Sometimes He will lead you in ways that seem unusual or counterintuitive, just as the traveler had the man plant in patterns that seemed strange. Trust the process. And remember this, the transformation is not instantaneous. The second garden took time to mature, just as your character will take time to develop. There will be seasons of planting, seasons of growth, seasons of harvest, and even seasons of rest. In all seasons, remain committed to working with the Father rather than working merely for Him or by yourself. The lasting impact. As the gathering finally prepared to depart for the night, Jesus said one more thing. The man in the parable discovered that being transformed himself was even more wonderful than having a beautiful garden. This is the mystery of the kingdom. God does not merely want to use you to accomplish tasks. He wants to transform you into the kind of person who naturally produces the fruit of His kingdom: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. When people see the second garden of your life, they will not praise you for your own efforts. They will recognize that something greater than human effort has been at work. And they will be drawn to seek the same transformation for themselves. The followers departed that evening with hearts full of contemplation. Each one carried the parable within them, understanding that they had heard something precious and profound. In the years that followed, though none of them could recall Jesus ever telling this exact parable again, they saw its truth demonstrated repeatedly in their own lives and in the lives of fellow believers. They learned that transformation was indeed a partnership, not a passive waiting for God to do everything, nor an exhausting attempt to change themselves through willpower alone, but an active cooperation with divine grace that produced results beyond anything they could have achieved independently. Conclusion. The parable that Jesus told only once became a lived reality for those who heard it. They became walking testimonies to the difference between human effort alone and human effort surrendered to divine guidance. Their lives spoke more eloquently than any retelling of the story could have done. Today, we too must choose which garden we will cultivate. Will we be satisfied with what we can accomplish through our own understanding and strength? Or will we accept the invitation to work in partnership with the Father, allowing Him to transform not only what we do, but who we are? The choice, as it was for those who sat beneath the olive tree that evening long ago, remains ours to make. May we choose the second garden, where transformation is complete and the fruit is eternal.